boys and girls, we are going to look at another book today. And I chose it because I wanted to focus on Galileo Galilei again. So the other day, I read The Starry Messenger by, that's the story about Galileo Galilei. And today, I'm going to read an excerpt, which means a small piece, from the book How They Croaked. I've used this book before, and today we're going to focus on Galileo Galilei, and his subheading for his section is Staying Alive. So I'm already curious about how he croaked. Something I like to do when I read two texts about the same topic, a person or an idea or some kind of information, sometimes I like to do a compare so that I can keep track of the information, and where information is repeated, I start to realize it might be more reliable. And when I have new information, I might want to double check to see if it's stated other places or how reliable my source is. So it's always good to read different accounts of information you want to learn. So today, on page 54, there is a short piece about Galileo. And I would like to compare it to what I read in Starry Messenger. So let's see. Or honestly, you could do it with any book that you read about Galileo. If you don't have that book, you can find other information, which could be fun. And you would write, of course, information you got from Starry Messenger, and you'd label it up here. And then information from How They Croaked about Galileo over here. And then the information that they have the same, you put in your overlap. And so you can try that as I read today. Maybe write down what you learn and then add things that are the same or move it to the middle later. Alrighty, I found page, I thought they said 54. Now I'm all confused. Some days are just like that, aren't they? Yeah, 54. This says Pocahontas though, so I'm dubious. Right. They actually meant 60. But, you know, whatever. They have it wrong in the table of contents. I checked twice. Galileo Galilei. Or maybe I'm looking at the wrong line. Now I'm super curious. Nope. They say Galileo Galilei Staying Alive starts on page 54. And, yeah, nope. So, Galileo Galilei Staying Alive. Here he is. Alrighty. Astronomer and physicist, born Florence, Italy, February 15th, 1564. Died Arcetri, Italy, January 8th, 1642. 77 years old. So back in the 1600s, this man lived a really long life. I think the average age span was around 50, 60 years old. Galileo was the smartest guy in the room. He knew this, and so did everybody else. Most people couldn't even read and were just trying to get food on the table, while Galileo was walking around asking himself questions like, what is the speed of falling things? And how can I calculate longitude at sea? Then he'd figure out the answers himself. Galileo thought the earth spun around the sun. The teachings of the Catholic Church were against the idea of the earth moving, and, I can already sense there's going to be a problem for this man. Thinking something like what Galileo thought could get a person killed back then. But it took a lot to kill Galileo. Well, that's comforting. So, little image here of a telescope. He was a mathematics professor for 20 years. In his day, professors lived with their students. Oh my goodness. I don't know about that. Galileo gave out entertaining assignments like, why does ice float in wine? And then he drank the experiment. He figured out how to make a military compass that ensured cannonballs hit their targets. Galileo, the big man on campus, eventually became known the world over as the father of modern science. Galileo was also the biological father of 3 illegitimate children. He never married, and the mother of his children died young. He sent his 2 daughters to a nunnery, and his son went to law school. In the 1500s, nobody lived long. If you made it to 35 years of age, you were lucky. Because of plagues, pox, and every other unimaginable nightmare that doctors didn't know how to cure, people dropped like flies. Okay, I said 50 or 60 was old, right? He just said the average age was 35. So I would be long dead. So sad. Okay, at 45, when Galileo had outlived most of his peers, he got his hands on the first telescope, which didn't work much better than squinting through a paper towel roll. He improved it to the magnification of 30, about as powerful as one you can find today in any toy store. Then he pointed the thing at the sky and actually discovered something. It was common knowledge that Jupiter existed, but Galileo was the first to see Jupiter's 4 moons, and he also saw dark spots on the sun. Watching all these heavenly bodies, Galileo realized something was moving. Us. The Earth was moving around the sun. In his own body, something else was moving. His kidney stones. Crystallized uric acid slowly came out through his urine, and it felt like there were burning asteroids in his groin. The problem was, Galileo drank wine and never water. At the time, wine was considered safer to drink than water. More burning meteorites developed in his feet and knees, which was a disease called gout. It deformed his hands into claws with lumpy knuckles, twisted fingers, and raw skin. It didn't matter how smart he was, he didn't know that the lead added to his wine as flavoring was poisonous, as was the lead that leached from the metal casks the wine was cured in. He drank a lot of lead-laced wine. It gave him headaches, anemia, and rotten teeth. Wow. So water wasn't always safe because people would go to the river and bathe and wash their clothes and urinate in the water. Animals died in the water. People didn't remove them. And so that was a way that diseases traveled quite a bit back then. Galileo was barely getting around when he sat down to write his book about the sun-centered universe, called Dialogues Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. He had a hole in his stomach muscle where his intestines bulged out, called a hernia. A heavy iron contraption called a truss was strapped on him every day to plug the hole. He saw a large halo around any light he looked at, and within the halo he saw nothing because of eye infections and what we now know as glaucoma. None of this stopped him from writing. But what was he thinking? The last guy who mentioned a sun-centered universe was burned at the stake by the church police, the Holy Office of the Inquisition. That would maybe inspire you not to have that idea. The Inquisition had the power to hunt down people who believed something different from the teachings of the Catholic Church. These people were called heretics, and sometimes they were tortured and put to death. Still, Galileo published his book. He believed it would be his ticket to immortality. The leaders of the Inquisition called Galileo in for a trial. Who did he think he was? When Galileo got to the trial, he was definitely the smartest guy in the room. But that wouldn't impress the inquisitors, so he played dumb. That didn't stop them from finding him guilty of heresy, rejecting the beliefs of those in power. He was sentenced to death as a lesson to others. But Galileo was smart enough to know he didn't need to die to make the truth more true. So Galileo told them what they wanted to hear. Sorry, I take that back. As a result, his sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. He was 70 years old and looking more dead than alive. The Council of the Inquisition let him go home under house arrest. Young science students moved in with him, just like old times, and Galileo got back to work. He eventually went completely blind and everything hurt. so his students had to carry him around in a chair, but he kept working. He lived for another 7 years. Eventually, the lead poisoning got to him. Galileo died of kidney failure on January 8, 1642, in Ariceti, Italy. He was 77 years old. He had lived the equivalent of 2 lifetimes. Because of the Inquisition, Galileo wasn't allowed to have a fancy funeral. He was buried in a small closet in the Basilica of St. Croaked. I think that's how you say it. 95 years later, the world of science caught up with Galileo, and his remains were moved to a big marble monument in the church. While they were at it, some fans removed a vertebra, a tooth, and 3 fingers from Galileo's right hand. Ew. Galileo's middle finger is on display at the Museum of the History of Science in Florence, Italy. Engraved below his middle finger are these words. This is the finger belonging to the illustrious hand that ran through the skies, pointing at the immense spaces and singling out new stars. It's more likely he pointed at the stars with his pointer finger, saving his middle finger to point at the Inquisition. The church didn't officially apologize for its treatment of Galileo until 1992, 350 years after his death. 1992, you guys. I was in college then. That's a long time after this guy passed away. So, some things I can tell you right off the bat was the tone in these 2 books. Crazy different. This one's kind of serious, story-like, pretty positive. This one's a little kind of satire, tongue-in-cheek tone. So I enjoyed hearing the 2 different tones in these books. But they both talked about his learning about the sun being the center of our universe. They both addressed the Inquisition and that he spent the end of his life under house arrest. This book focused on his ailments, some of his lifestyle choices, and other discoveries that he made or questions that he answered. Whereas this one really just focused on his astrology and it spoke more about the telescope he made, whereas it was like 1 sentence in here, right? So those are some basic differences that I could put here and here, and then the similarities. And of course I would double check before I wrote them down. Normally I'm going to give you the opportunity, though, to think about doing a compare-contrast with Galileo Galilei, with either these books if you have access to them, or maybe you want to do something different. But again, this is a great way to look at information writing and multiple sources and see what they have that is in common and what's different. All right, keep reading, have fun, bye.